So just a few slides about ANCA. This is who we are as an organization. Again, ANCA stands for Adirondack North Country Association. Our vision is to build a new economy that works for all. Our mission is to build prosperity across the northern New York region, and our aim is to create and sustain wealth and value in local communities. This is the area that we serve. Ignore the fact that there's some blue counties. These are the all 14 counties that we serve, and these are also the same counties that are eligible for this grant program. So if you belong in a county that is not green or blue, you are not eligible to apply. Feel free to leave if you want to. Just want to make that clear that this is only for these counties. Our key program areas, we have four of them. I'm, of course, part of the food systems program, myself and my colleague Jennifer Perry, who's running Compost for Good. She's very much in the farmland viability side of things, where I'm more on the farm business side of things. We also have three other program areas: small business, clean energy, and diversity and inclusion. Oh, and that's the end of my little presentation. Let me just add some more people. I see the waiting room. Okay. Let me then bounce over to, I guess I should have just kept that going. Okay. Nope. Sorry. Some Zoom technical difficulties here. Share. Okay. I'm just pulling the RFP up here because this, like I said, this is what we're all looking at, or what you're looking at. I figured let's just stick with the same document and start instead of reinventing the wheel and creating a new presentation that's a bit disjointed from the RFP. And so at this point, everyone, feel free to stop me, like any point. If you have a question that's related to what we're looking at or not, I'm happy to field any questions? I know I've already received quite a few questions about the program, which I've been posting to the Q&A document that's linked on our website. So I've been trying to keep up with those. So keep your eyes on that. I'm just keeping that as a live document. All right, going back to the RFP here. Let's bounce down to the AMP program objectives. So their three stated priorities are supporting producers to develop sustained methods for expansion of markets for American agricultural products, creating new markets, improving supply chains, and enabling direct-to-consumer sales, and improving collective resource sharing, access to market infrastructure, and promotion of long-term economic sustainability within the amplification of market expansion. That's a mouthful right there. And it took us a few weeks to figure out what the heck they were saying. What we've distilled this down to, and I've probably said this already, is the expansion or creation of markets. And that can look like a variety of different things. That could be the actual establishment of a new product line, or the development of a website, or hiring someone to do some graphic design. So the one can interpret market being a fairly broad version of what they're talking about here. And of course, the language is vague, so there is room for interpretation. That's how ANCA is interpreting this. So as long as there is expansion or creation of some sort, I do want to say that one project type that we probably can't fund is strict efficiency projects. And what I mean by that is if you're a farm or a producer who's not looking to expand, like I'm going to, for the next 2 years, or, I'm next however long, I'm happy with my current production level. I'm happy with the acreage that I have. I just want to buy something that will increase my efficiency and increase my bottom line. That's probably a project that won't fit in this, just because the way we're measuring success of this project is sales. So if you're not increasing your sales, then technically the project wasn't as successful as we had hoped. And this money is focused on the expansion of markets. So that is one technicality that I wanted to make clear is that if you are not looking to expand and you just want your current operation to become more efficient without increasing sales, this you won't your proposal, you're more than welcome to submit your proposal. It likely won't be competitive. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. I'll continue moving through this RFP. And we have a definition of what agricultural products mean. It's fairly broad, as you can see, includes processed products. So that, of course, includes value added. Um, and one thing I want to point out here is that we're hoping that these projects will be completed by December 31st of this year. I know for some projects that might be tricky, especially if you have certain planting objectives, and those can only happen in the spring. Especially trees. I know trees can be quite finicky with the weather and when those can get in the ground. At this point, we're trying to keep it December 31st, and that's more of just what funding is available for us, for staff. If we keep pushing this project beyond that, it kind of thins us out as far as capacity. There might be some wiggle room if all our proposals say that we can't do this before December 31st, but we're trying to hold that for the moment, just because that it makes it easier for us logistically. Let me just admit this person here. So moving on, as I mentioned, all applicants must be located inside of ANCA's 14 county service area. Here are the counties. Um, and eligible applicants must be the following. And this has changed a little bit since the first edition of this RFP was launched. This is now the second edition. Originally, we said you had to own the cultivated fields and pasture land, but we've expanded that to own, leased, or somehow controlled. And the way you prove that is up to the FSA and what documentation they want to show control. So it doesn't have to be a lease necessarily. I don't know the particulars of what the FSA is going to require to show ownership. It's up to them. And I haven't gone through myself personally through that process yet. But I know it can be fairly flexible with what documentation they're looking for. Um, so we've broadened that because a lot of folks don't own their land, or they're leasing their farmland. And thankfully, NRCS USDA is more flexible with that than we originally thought. The next piece of criteria here is an intention to sell products in 2026. That might not be feasible for some crops, like if you're planting broodstock or some other type of plant that takes a few years to mature, then that's going to be what it is, and that's fine. Um, but the intention has to be that there is an intent to sell, rather than just have it be for like a homesteading operation where it's for your own consumption. The focus here is putting markets out on the marketplace where dollars are exchanged. So I know we've had one farm who at the moment it's a more educational based operation and they're not selling and don't intend to sell soon. And that can get a little problematic for us since our reporting is measuring, or trying to measure at least, dollars worth of products sold, um, and harvested. If that's part of your project, there are projects that don't involve any harvesting per se, and we'll get more into that. But we're focusing on the market expansion and dollars exchanged. And then the last piece here is having a recorded gross farm income, other known as GCFI, of less than $250,000 in 2025. I've gotten a handful of questions about this, and they're all very legitimate questions about why do you have this threshold? Seems kind of random. It's less random than you think. The prior program under the prior administration had used this threshold to define what an underserved farmer was, and we just kept this threshold in this proposal. The new threshold, with the current administration, they're not using the term underserved farmers anymore. They've gotten rid of that completely, but they're now using the term small family farm, and that threshold is $350,000 GCFI. And if you want to look up what is included in GCFI, just you can type that in. Of course, there's accounting stuff involved that's not my forte. But the internet is great, and you can learn how to calculate GCFI that way. I think it's Schedule F of your income taxes will also be adequate. We're not asking for this documentation when you apply. I don't want that. So don't send it to me, please, just because, especially Schedule F of your income taxes, that will be, I know, sensitive information. We do retain the right to ask for that documentation at the time of grant award. If you say your gross income 65,000, and we look at your farm and you have like 1,000 cows, we might have some suspicion. So we do retain that right, but we don't want that information as part of the application process. So we trust you all. We love working with you, and a lot of our work in the agricultural realm is, just based on relationships, and we want to keep it that way. So we're not trying to be strict about this. Beginning farmers are eligible to apply, so you don't need to have income in prior years to apply to this. You just need to have land or access to land. Um, we won't consider joint proposals with multiple applicants because that gets real tricky real quick, especially since all producers need to go through the FSA process of getting your fields delineated and getting an FSA number. It's not a hard process. It's just part of the process. Um, and this last clause here is that only the owners of the farm may apply. We've already had people express interest who were farm laborers, and the farm owner wasn't aware of the farm laborer applying or submitting interest. So we asked that the owner of the farm apply. I doubt that this is relevant to most, if not all of you, but if you're part of a business entity that has a parent corporation, it's the parent company and those owners that apply. But again, that's not really a super typical model in the North Country. Any questions about eligibility or anything that I've mentioned thus far? I'll give like a few seconds for someone to jump in if you have any
Hi,
interest.
John. I have a
Hey,
question. Hi,
hey, Tori.
Hi, Tori. I'm Tori. This is a eligibility question.
Hmm.
Thank you for the clarification about efficiency versus creation and expansion. That was helpful. Um, we grow vegetables, yada yada, but we
Hmm.
also are trying to get more into the resale. We work a lot through up in the north, in Essex and stuff too. And we're just wondering if something like a retail cooler and freezer if it held multiple different kinds of, like some of our products, some of other people's products. Is that something that could be funded?
So, unfortunately, refrigeration is completely off the table.
Okay.
I think the USDA just doesn't like to fund refrigeration for the most part unless they have a special grant. But with this particular program, baked into the statute is actually a prohibition on funding refrigerated storage.
Oh,
It's
perfect. Okay, thank
it's the
you.
only thing that they specifically called out as something that they don't want to fund. They of course have blanket explanations of other things they don't want to fund, but the one specific thing that they said we really don't want to fund this is refrigeration.
Great. Perfect.
So sorry to be the bearer of bad news because that's the thing that we kind of need the most in the North Country, or
Yeah.
one thing that's we we really need.
Yeah.
And if Cherie's on this call, she can really attest to that too. Cherie Witten of Witten Family Farms and the Adirondack Food Hub. Like we need this capacity, and
Yeah.
that's a weak spot in our food system. But the
Okay.
USDA just doesn't want to fund that. And we'll get into these categories too, but they also don't want to fund general purpose equipment, and that kind of holds true for a lot of their grants too. So
Right. Like anything.
unfortunately, no. But if you're thinking of like a roadside farm stand, then yes. Just can't have refrigeration.
Got it.
Yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
of course, Tori. Anybody else?
What about irrigation?
Irrigation, interesting question. That's a tricky one. Uh, a project that was irrigation by itself probably wouldn't score super well. But if it was irrigation that was part of a larger project, I think that would score better. Just because irrigation falls into that category of more general purpose equipment in the sense that it can serve more than one commodities. And I'll get into how we're defining special purpose versus general purpose equipment. But irrigation's tricky because it depends on the size of the system and if it's the main focus of your grant or a supply that you need to execute the larger objectives of the grant. So we can get more
Okay.
into that, but that's my very wishy-washy reply.
All right. So, I mean, I guess my question is it more focusing on the establishment of a new crop or the establishment of extending an existing crop?
It's both. It's expanding existing. So if you like, let's say if you're saying irrigation, let's say if you have a tree nursery or an
So
orchard.
blueberries.
What's that?
So blueberries.
Blueberries, amazing. I eat so many blueberries. Blueberries, yeah. If you can tie it to the expansion of your blueberry patch, and you can tie it to this will lead to expansion of this product in this way, then I think it would be more competitive than just uh, irrigation by itself, just because like my existing blueberries need irrigation, and this will make my life easier. It's like this will make my life easier projects that are the least fundable, unfortunately.
Hmm.
Um, but we can talk offline about that more if you would like, because yeah, irrigation is something I've been chewing on a lot as far as how to get it funded without getting ourselves in trouble.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, we'll have a larger discussion about equipment momentarily.
John,
Um,
another question. You
yeah,
mentioned that it would be possible to establish a new product line. So if you
yeah,
were a producer and you were creating a new value-added product, but you wanted to buy in some of the ingredients for that product, is that an issue, or is there a percentage of the inputs that would need to come from your farm, or is there anything related to that?
that's a complicated question, Flip. So you're proposing using grant funds to buy products from other farms, correct?
Well, if you're diversifying your farm by developing a new
Yeah.
value-added product.
Yep. So, I think the way we've imagined this is the money would go to, and tell me if I'm missing the point here, Flip, because I got a little boggled by that question. But the purpose of the money was to go to projects that were developing, expanding, or developing products on that farm. Um, does that help at all, or did I miss the question completely?
Yeah, it sounds like there's a preference, but not explicitly stated that the inputs are coming from your farm.
Correct. If you're looking at value add, we would. We would hope that it was coming from the farm, but I think that's a nuance that we have not necessarily considered because I think the definition of agricultural products here, raised and produced on farms and processed or manufactured products thereof, that's not super helpful. So um, I think we would consider it for sure. But I think it might be good for the two of us to have a conversation if that's what you're thinking, or if you have a farm in mind who's thinking of something like that, because we haven't fleshed that out. And to be completely honest, we're building this airplane as we're flying it because we got the money back literally a month ago to this day, and we realized this would be most helpful if we got this out quickly since planting season's around the corner. So at the
I think
cost
it
of
will
our,
come up. Yeah, I'd love to learn more about it if it does
yeah,
get fleshed out more, because I think it will come up for other people that you might have an ingredient in a product that would be yours, but you're sourcing from other capable producers in your region to develop that recipe and diversify your market.
yep. Yep, that would be. I'll have to think on that one and chat with some folks about that. Because that's definitely a more tricky wicket for sure. But thanks for bringing that up. I had not thought about that. Any other folks with questions about
I'm
eligibility?
Brian. I'm
Hey
Brian
there,
Bristol
Brian.
from, yep. And I have a question regarding, so my question is based on what about purchasing custom harvesting equipment or food processing equipment to expand um, an existing product,
Uh,
sort of cut back on some of the production time so I can produce more sales income at
two things to
markets.
that. Usually, custom processing equipment is eligible because a lot of this equipment is like meant for like a single product, like squash peeler, or that's a horrible
Hmm.
example. But if it has a commodity name in it, usually it's special purpose. And as long as you're showing that in a year from now, the result of this equipment will increase sales, you should be fine. Of course, I'll need to see the specifics of the proposal. But that sounds like it should be eligible. The devil's always within the details, of course. And we'll talk more
Yeah,
about equipment soon.
yeah, that's helpful.
Cool.
Mhm.
Anyone else about project overview, eligibility before we move on to use of funds?
Yeah, hey, this is Bernadette.
Hey there.
I'm in Saranac Lake and I've been really planning on getting my farm stand open this year. So
Cool.
I feel like that's a good expansion of market, you know.
Yeah,
So
totally.
I need like signage and things like that. And I've been
Hmm.
working on my website and some marketing things. Would they pay at all for furniture, for like countertops or stuff to hold like a POS system or a POS system, like a tablet?
Yeah. So again, the devil's in the details with that one. Like we were imagining some of this money could go to the establishment of a farm stand. And if things are needed in that farm stand and are typical to farm stands, then I think it's a green light. If you're looking for like a lazy boy recliner for the farm stand, probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah, furniture can get tricky because that's
No, I'm just like tables,
yeah.
display for marketing. You can't just
Yep.
keep things like, so if I wanted to bring another farmer in who's got more vegetable production, he could, I could have some space crates or whatever. I have a walk-in, I have refrigeration and all of that.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I know if it's meant for like the display of products or marketing, then it should be fine. It should be fine. And marketing, like that's the whole spirit of this grant. So if you're like, oh, I have a photographer, website designer in mind, I'm like that's honestly probably the highest in the USDA's mind, the highest and best use of this money is for like marketing.
online.
Um, Online, yeah, definitely.
Mm.
So I will get into more of this soon, but yeah, your project sounds like a really good fit.
Cool.
Um, any other questions about eligibility before we move on to use of funds?
John, I have
Oh,
a quick question. I'm not sure if this is out of line at all, but we're working on breaking into agritourism,
Hmm.
specifically pumpkin picking on our farm.
Yep.
And we have had last year was horrible for us. We planted, I think, 700 pumpkin plants, and every single one of them was eaten by deer.
Oh my gosh.
Despite our efforts with trying to keep them away and whatever
Hmm.
possible means are available. What it's come down to is that we can't do this unless we actually invest in some sort of permanent tall fencing to keep the deer out.
Hmm.
Would something
Hmm.
like that be a possibility for this grant? The actual fencing itself? Because otherwise we
Fencing, yeah.
have nothing.
Yeah, no, fencing falls more into that gray area of it being less competitive because it's more, I mean, in your case, it one can really show like, yeah, this fencing is going to result in like productivity because my pumpkins are not going to be devoured by the deer. It's just a bit
Right.
trickier when you're competing against someone who says, "Oh, I want a machine to like that is designed specifically to pick apples," for instance, because that's like a direct relationship to the actual expansion of the commodity, where
Yep.
fencing gets a little tricky because it kind of feels like general purpose in the sense that that fencing could be used to serve other purposes too, and that's
Yeah.
that's that gray area. So it just depends on how you pitch it. But I will say it probably will be less competitive than someone who's like proposing to start like a goat dairy, and they're like, I want to buy goats, I want to buy goat stanchions and a goat milker. Because that's like a brand new product line and the equipment's meant for like specifically for goats. You can't use it on anything else. So
Right, gotcha.
so it's a little trickier, but I feel your pain, I see your pain, and I'm so sorry. Those
No,
must
no,
be
no.
really tasty deer though. So hopefully you have
Yeah,
friends that
yeah, it's pumpkin flavored venison around here.
man.
All right, thanks, man.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions before we move on to use of funds? Okay,
No,
yep, yeah. What's up?
no, I just said no.
Oh, okay, okay, sounds good. Let's talk about the thing that you've probably all been most interested slash excited slash anxious about, and that is eligible projects and expenses. And this language, admittedly, is a little all over the place, and that's because our proposal was all over the place. Just need to admit someone here real quick. Um, and yeah, let's just dive into it. So as you know, the grant maximum is $10,000. And here are the following eligible categories. And it goes from really, really specific to really, really general. Alley cropping, composting facilities, high tunnels, low tunnels, silvopasture, and tree and shrub preparation and planting. I'll stop there for a reason, because the reason why these six are awfully specific is because they are NRCS-based practices. And this is a whole different ball of wax compared to the rest. Because since they are NRCS-based practices, you have to go through federal environmental review, which is called the CPA 52 process. That would be handled by us, meaning me. I would be doing all that CPA 52 work. It's not terribly onerous, to be honest. I would need just a few answers from you, but I would be the one filling it out. Um, but since it's tied to NRCS-based practices, so like if you just type one of these into Google and just write NRCS next to it, it'll pop up like a data sheet with a number. They're all numbered, and it tells you exactly what they mean by this. So if you're curious about what any of these mean, just Google it, type in NRCS. It'll give you the PDF, which pretty much tells you how to implement each practice. And there's hundreds of these, but we chose these practices specifically because they are related to production of some kind. Maybe not silvopasture as much, but these are related to the advance of a commodity, where like cover cropping and the bajillion other NRCS-based practices, which are focused on soil fertility and uh, erosion mitigation, et cetera, those are a little trickier to tie into the advancement of commodities since they're a bit more tangential and focused on soil health, which is super critical, of course. Don't want to diminish that point. But since this money is commodity focused, we limited NRCS-based practices to these. I'll just kind of go through them and give you a brief interpretation of how I understand them. Alley cropping, this was actually part of our original uh, carbon sequestration and mitigation project, the prior project. This is essentially planting trees in between rows of crops. Um, and we're thinking that these would be fruit trees, essentially, that would be planted in between cultivated crops. Composting facilities, that would essentially be a slab on grade, no soil disturbance aside from leveling the ground, and then building a lean-to like structure with multiple bays for compost generation. There's a very specific diagram of how they want these to be constructed, but can't involve any soil disturbance below 12 inches. High tunnels and low tunnels, those should be pretty self-explanatory. I know Equip has their own high tunnel, low tunnel program. I forget if there's a match with that, but this, of course, you can use it just to fund the entire thing. Silvopasture would be a little tricky with this program, and I forget why. I included it. I think it was just to maintain maybe some semblance of the old project. My cat wants to join. But this would be a little tricky because usually silvopasture isn't the actual trees in the pasture aren't the commodity. It's the animals that are enjoying the trees that are the commodity. So I would say that if you're thinking silvopasture, it might be tricky unless the trees that you're planting in the pasture are also fruit bearing, but then I imagine the cows would get to it first, or other animals. Tree and shrub establishment. This is a pretty broad category, like blueberry bushes, any type of fruit, nut, um, other type of bearing plant, I think falls under this category. So if you're thinking about starting an orchard or like a U-pick farm, this would be a good use of those funds. Of course, having to go through federal environmental review. But don't let the environmental review be a like a barrier to you applying. It might affect timing because it might take like a month or two for us to get through the environmental process. So we might actually have to extend the December 31st deadline because if people want to plant things, we don't get the environmental review done in time to effectively plant things. Uh, I don't think we want to dissuade people from starting like an orchard or something. So we're flexible here is what I'm trying to say. So if you have a dream, please submit your dream and we'll try to make it happen. Um, then moving on to these very general categories here. And we get them general for a reason, and that is because we certainly understand that we don't know all the different ways that you're thinking about market expansion and market development. So we just want to keep this broad and let your imaginations go wild. And so this could look like a variety of different things, but just to list off a few things that I've been thinking about, like hiring someone who's a specialist in some type of farm planning, business side of things, or if you're thinking you need a new website and you want to hire a photographer or get some drone footage or something, um, uh, you can do that. Or if you need a customized business plan, you can do that. If you want to build a farm stand by the side of the road, or you need sell sheets, or you need a new logo or signs, those should all work. And honestly, like I said, like this grant is really focused on establishing markets and marketing is a big facet of that. And I actually would encourage all of you, if you're done with your grant proposal and you're like, oh, well, it's a $5,000 project or whatever, maybe throwing in some marketing in there because I think that for us would be helpful because we're trying to meet the spirit of this program, and that is market development, market advancement. So if you feel like your proposal is like, I'm not sure how close it aligns with this, throw in some money in there for a photographer to take some photos. You having photos, it's always helpful from what I hear from other businesses, and they usually have a long shelf life. So we have a list of folks that we know do really, really good work as far as photography, logo design, etc. So if you want to throw in some money in there for someone to do some of that development, we'd be happy to talk to you and scope out a project or how that be a facet of your proposal and come up with some cost estimates. I think it'd be nice to have some proposals that included that, especially if you're already thinking about it. Please do, um, especially if you need it. Cool. Let me just keep going before I open up for questions. So the ones in yellow here, I would love for you all, if you are thinking about any of these NRCS-based practices, please talk to me before you submit your application because we need to talk about the environmental review process, timelines, etc. Some of these projects may be more complicated than you're imagining. And so just want to have a chat about that. I also strongly encourage everyone to chat with me before they submit, just because it's helpful for me to see what you're proposing to purchase. And then I can tell you, like, this is eligible, this isn't eligible, this is tricky. That way, I can kind of help you figure out and determine what's the strongest proposal. Because we just don't want to have a lot of proposals that have ineligible costs and then have like a lot of partially funded projects or just a lot of misunderstanding. So please, 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 I would love to see a proposal and help you develop it. I'm not part of the scoring team. We have two other staff members doing the scoring, so I can help you with the costs and seeing if they're eligible as much as I can, because I won't have a conflict of interest in that sense. But I do want to put eligible projects in front of them. So I'm kind of that gatekeeper in that sense. Okay, so please email me. Would love to hear from you. And a lot of you already have, so thank you so much. Some language here about the use of funds. All funds must be used for the direct implementation of the projects. They can be used for these following categories: supplies, materials, technical service fees, contractors, get out of the way, special purpose equipment with a per unit cost less than $10,000. So the piece of equipment in its entirety has to cost less than $10,000. Even if you have a cash match and you're like, well, this thing I want costs 12. Can I use this as a partial funding of this? It's like, no, it has to be less than 10K. To make a really long story short, there is a USDA threshold that we want to avoid, because that gets us not in trouble, but it makes our lives wicked complicated. And we just would rather avoid the complication. So yeah, per unit costs less than 10K. And we are not funding general purpose equipment. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself here. So let me first talk about what special purpose equipment is. And this is a USDA defined term. If you Google it on the USDA, it won't get you that far because often it applies to research. So it talks about microscopes and not really applicable to this. But the spirit of it is meant for technical activities. So I think the best way of approaching it is examples. So general purpose equipment would be like a tractor, a plow, something that could be used for a lot of different uses on the farm. And the litmus test that I've been generally using, which isn't perfect, but what I've been using and it has been largely effective, one could debate that, but is how many commodities can this piece of equipment serve? And I'm only talking about equipment here, not materials, not supplies, just something that smells like, looks like, feels like equipment. And that is, if this piece of equipment serves more than like a couple commodities, then it probably is general purpose. So I know someone recently talked to me about uh, like a goat milker, which probably could be used for a sheep too. But like if it's like two, like that's pretty darn specific. So, but like people have been asking me about like mowers, and I guess hay is like a certain commodity, but for like cover cropping, a mower gets complicated, and I've been generally keeping that as general purpose equipment, just because a mower can mow different types of grass or cover crops or whatever. And again, cover crops are not really an eligible use anyways. Um, so I haven't really thought about specialized hay. Not that humans are eating it, but I think it would be technically part of this program because I don't think it's limited to human consumption. I could be wrong about that, but either which way, that's the general litmus test, and it's not perfect because there might be something that serves like three, or it's just it's a weird piece of equipment. But just to keep, yeah, for the sake of this presentation, if it has like the name of the product in it, like squash peeler or berry picker or something like that, or like an evaporator for a syruping, sugaring business, like that's you can't really use that for anything else but evaporating sap. Things of that nature. It's more of I would say it's probably more of a continuum in a spectrum than it is like black and white, because yeah, there's equipment out there that one can argue like this is pretty specific. It only serves like a handful of products. Um, if you have any questions about this, email me. I imagine maybe half of you probably have questions about the difference between general purpose and special purpose equipment. I would encourage you to email me those questions. just so we're not bogging down this presentation with questions about specific equipment. So if you have questions about general questions about special purpose, general purpose, uh, feel free to share these during this presentation. But if you're like, how about this? Let's save that to email, and I can then post those to the Q&A, just because I can sense that that might be like a tidal wave of questions. I will open up questions soon. Let me just get through ineligible uh, general purpose equipment, buildings, and land. So if you wanted to buy a shed, probably wouldn't work out. It would have to be a farm stand. Someone proposed a trailer at one point. A trailer would definitely be general purpose because you could also probably use that to haul your ATVs if you want to. Salaries, wages, indirect expenses, expenses related to motor vehicles. So if you just want a new F-150, not that you can go far with $10,000 these days with that, but you can't buy a truck. Things that go on a truck, possibly if it's meant for a specific product, like a specific commodity. But things to make your truck nicer, probably not. Any expenses related to the writing of the grant, working capital, workforce housing, office supplies, and any expenses incurred prior to the grant award. So we're not retroactively awarding this. So if you already spent the money, or you're going to spend the money before you receive your money, we can't do that just because technicalities with this grant. So you have to wait until you have the money in hand before you can spend the money on the things that you want. Okay, any questions about any of the above?
I do have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So that is, what about, I've been thinking about this for years, renting a van
Mm,
to deliver wholesale produce to co-ops.
that would be ineligible, unfortunately.
Okay. I was
Yeah,
wondering about that.
yeah, for two
Leasing, I was
reasons.
thinking of leasing and renting. Yeah, small
Yeah,
van.
just because the van would be very, very general purpose. Like, could use it to move vehicle or move produce, and you could probably use it for a bajillion other things too. So
Yeah,
that's where
that's
that
right.
litmus test comes into play there. Yeah,
Hmm. Okay. I can see why the farm stand makes sense
yeah,
because you can do that on your farm.
yep, yeah. Any other
You said
questions?
some,
Oh, sorry,
you
keep
did
going.
say, yeah, you said something earlier. I think you implied a roadside stand or something.
Yep. Yeah, yeah, no, if you wanted like on your farm, if you wanted to build like a roadside stand, that's totally creating a new market. Like I'm selling direct to consumer at the end of my driveway. So
Well,
any
I was thinking like a roadside stand, like say you go to, um, what was it? Adirondack Farmers Market Cooperative had a market out, I think, in towards Saranac Lake.
hmm
There was a um, train track around the corner from the market. That might have been the one before Keene, like Elizabeth E. Town.
hmm
There's some sort of railroad track that's. I heard stories someone was using it, and so would that be something that could be submitted as some kind of equipment? I mean, some kind of space to increase sales or to
Are
extend
you
your sales.
are you proposing a mobile market or are you proposing to purchase
No,
property?
just using space that is not normally used at a farmer's market or for a farmer's market.
Oh, okay. So you were looking to like rent the space?
I don't know how that works because
Okay.
I know that the town and the city and the county might be involved and you have to get licenses for that.
Yeah,
And
that
some
would
you
be
don't. Yeah,
tricky.
some you don't.
Because it
Yeah.
wouldn't be on the farm and like the whole FSA process we're requiring you to get registered. So they like look at your fields and stuff.
Yeah.
So that feels could be a little tricky. If you were like proposing materials that you would use to take your stuff to market, that would be a better fit. But to start
Okay.
an off-farm market may be a little too much of a stretch for this grant, just because then the grant funds are going to a space that's no longer in the farm. And
Okay.
we're kind of like on farm centric with this money.
I was trying to tie, I was thinking about tying in the expansion of your market, you know?
Yeah, no, I mean
into like a
it's
roadside little trailer or something, like
yeah.
a used trailer that I can haul behind the truck and then sell the produce out of the trailer and pull all the tables out.
I think
Um,
you're talking about the guy by Raybrook over by the new rail trail, and he pulls over. I think he's like a Syracuse-based farm, and he's right off of 86. I know what you're
I've
talking
seen
about.
that before. They just pull it out. And like,
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how does that work?
Right, so I think he's got some arrangement with the town, to be able to use the space.
Okay.
But I think you just have to get permission. So
Okay.
I used to organize markets and I still run a couple, so I get it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't dissuade you from maybe a mobile market. Probably renting space off farm
Distribution.
would be complicated, but if that's like the highest and best use for you, maybe go for it. But we can chat offline about this too if you have other ideas
Yeah,
as
it's not
well.
something that I need to do. I
Yeah,
just
yeah.
sort of thought of that might increase sales for small farms,
Yeah, no, it
if they
totally
can
would.
broaden the reach, somehow.
I think yeah. Yeah. Renting other space on other people's property is something that we hadn't considered. And it
Yeah.
might, yeah, it can get a little dicey, for sure. But if it's something that you're interested in exploring, we can chat offline about it. Um,
Yeah, it's sort of like I thought about this years ago, and I even long story short, talked to CCE and Plattsburgh Town Hall. I went through
mhm.
Courtney Miser's department. They referred me to somewhere
Okay.
else, and nothing got responded. It
Yeah.
was sort of like they didn't know what else to say to me besides, well, if you use the park 1 day a week
Mhm.
because you want to get to the park and you want to have another day to sell produce and not wait for Plattsburgh Farmers
Yeah.
Market on Saturdays because they don't do Sundays anymore or Wednesdays.
Yep.
Well, these are all the guidelines that you have to adhere to first,
Yep.
and you have to move your truck into a different police zone every 2 hours during the week because they will ticket you.
Mm.
So that was sort of like that.
Can we move on to the rest of the
That was
Yeah.
complicated to
Yeah.
me. Yeah, that's why I
Yeah.
brought that up. That's why I brought that
Yeah,
up.
I
Yeah.
would say before I move on, like projects that seem complicated and may not be implemented before December and have a lot of moving pieces, probably we would not score as highly as projects that are just like very simple. I'm gonna get this
Okay.
done ASAP. So let
And
me
that's
let
why I
me
was thinking about the equipment, like leasing a van
yep,
or hauling a trailer behind a small trailer behind the truck.
yep.
Yeah,
So yeah, let's
that's what
continue
that
to chat
was.
about this offline for sure, but thanks for bringing that
Okay.
up.
All right. Thank you.
Let me fly through the rest. I just saw what time it was. I'm like, wow, it's already 5:55. That's crazy. And probably half of you haven't had
Hmm.
dinner yet. So let me fly through this and open it up to questions about everything else but use of funds, since that seems to be the general theme here. So matching funds, pretty simple. You're allowed to provide your own matching funds. Does not give your proposal any special preference. There's no points awarded to that. But again, there's that limit for special purpose equipment of $10,000, so you can't exceed that per unit. Award requirements, pretty straightforward. You have to establish your farm with the FSA, and some paperwork you have to do. But not a lot of complicated business with that, and that's pretty easy. Award details. So the one interesting thing about this program is we give you the money first. It's not reimbursable. We hand you the check, you buy the thing, you give us the receipt, case closed. And that's how the USDA wants us to do it, which is great because usually grants are reimbursable and a lot of farms, especially this time of year, just like cash flow can be a little challenging. And yeah, reimbursement based programs, especially when you're waiting on a government to pay you that keeps shutting down, that can get not optimal for farmers. So the fact that we can just give you a check and say, run away and be happy. I mean, under, of course, the understanding that you're going to buy it for the right things. That's the principle of this grant. We give you the money, you buy the thing, we document it, and then you go along your happy entrepreneurial way. Scope of work. You sign the MOU that says you're going to do the work that you said that you would do. Kind of protects us a little bit too. We'll have a clawback, um, like boilerplate language in there saying if you use it to buy an F-150, then we probably will ask for the money back. Um, uh, completing the work by certain dates, and then reporting requirements, which will be data that we collect from you for our own reporting. So we'll be measuring like sales, volume, etc., or volume of harvest if that's part of the project. As you all know, this is the link to the application. You've probably looked at it already. Um, Proposal evaluation. We have just a series of compliance questions here. We already talked about this. As far as the actual scoring criteria, alignment with AMP priorities will score the highest. It's 50% of all the points. Then project viability. Does this seem like a project that will be implemented quickly? And does this seem fairly simple and not too complicated? Um, then return on investment. So we're looking at projects that have some sustainability, are well researched, that we expect, yeah, this money will continue to have an ROI well after year one. And then we just threw in regional impact in there, only 10% of 100% of the scoring, but we thought it'd be interesting to see if there are projects that would have an impact greater than just the farm. But again, since that's not going to be a lot of these projects, it's not scored highly. But we were just curious. Proposals are due Wednesday, April 8th at 11:59 p.m. I hope none of you are up at 11:45 p.m. submitting this grant. I've been there before. But for your insanity, I hope none of you will be in that position. And we will hope to get you written response about your application earlier than May 1st, but we are holding ourselves to Friday, May 1st. And then, yeah, that's it. You can always email me questions. The question and answer document is on the website. Everything's on the website. If you just Google ANCA Farm Grant, that's the first thing that pops up. So it's pretty easy to find, and the application's there too. Okay, 6 o'clock. Wow, I ended just in time. So now we will resume questions and answers. But I will start with all questions that have to do with this, aside from use of funds. So just about the program, eligibility, etc. We will hold for questions about use of funds. So like, can I use this money for this at the end? And let me just pause for 1 second. So if you're someone who has to leave right now because you have a screaming 3-year-old who's hungry, thank you for being here. Or if you're hungry and feel like a 3-year-old who wants to scream, thank you for being here. I understand. Enjoy your dinner. If you have any more questions, please reach out, email, phone, whatever. Happy to chat through things. But just glad that you're here, and thank you for expressing interest. We look forward to working with you.
Don,
But yeah,
I have a
going back to
question.
yes.
What is there a timeline for showing proof of increased dollars or increased, revenue from the expansion? What is the measure for proof that you've increased your sales?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it's a bit squishy because some of you, like I mentioned earlier, may have a project that won't show proof of sales right away. And honestly, that's okay. Because some projects have a longer lead time in which the project will actually yield benefits. So, in theory, all projects need to be able to yield benefits at some point. And so we'll be able to sniff that out and be like, okay, this project, yeah, will yield benefits by year 3. But for us, like that deadline is when we close the grant, which we will hopefully do spring of next year. We might be working and reporting into the summer of next year. So let's just say there's a chance, like our deadline to submit all reports and close out this grant to the USDA is between March and July of next year. So if you have a project that on its surface seems amazing and will yield benefits and sales, but it's a product that just takes a few years, like an orchard, to yield its commodity, that's going to be perfectly fine. Perfectly fine, because in the end, you have still established a product line. We're not being held to proving that every project yielded benefits. We just have to show that this money was used for this purpose. Did it go to a project that is expanding a market or creating a market? If we fulfill those, then we're fine. So don't stress about the reporting. That's our that's our problem we have to worry about. But if your project fits the spirit of AMP, then you're good to go.